Hey guys, today I'll show you a supernatural horror TV series named Penny Dreadful Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins in London during the Victorian era. In a house, a little girl snuggled into her mother's embrace. It was the season of chilly winters in London. The girl's mother rose from a bed just over a meter wide, tucked her child under the covers, and lit the kerosene lamp before heading out to the loo. She crossed the pitch-black corridor, her breath heavy and laborious. Outside, the sky was overcast and the wind was fierce. In their humble home, there wasn't enough coal to keep them warm, nor enough kerosene to light their wind-shaken dwelling. The dark bathroom, accompanied by the howling wind, seemed especially eerie and terrifying. The little girl was awakened by the noise, finding her mother absent. She cautiously moved under the bed, not minding the socks on her feet. Her heart thumped wildly as she called for her mother. The girl crossed the corridor and wobbled to the bathroom door. She opened it, only to scream loudly like a chicken at some horrific sight. The scene then shifts to a woman devoutly kneeling before a cross, frantically praying to God. Suddenly, a spider crawled out from one side of the cross, quickly reaching the woman and stopping on her middle finger, facing her. The woman's body began to convulse, her spirit out of sync, as if her soul had been sucked out and her body made into a spider woman. The long night finally passed. By midday, the clouds hadn't fully dispersed. A handsome cowboy stood in the center of a club performing his gunplay. The audience, dressed in finery, included the same woman who had been praying the previous night. The cowboy's gunplay was skilled, never missing a shot, which drew cheers from the audience. Some girl even ran up to flirt with him, using her muscles. The cowboy, named Ethan, was an American born into a noble family. He fled his hometown after getting into trouble and lived a nomadic life, performing with his gun to make a living. His precious pocket watch and tattered clothes, his trembling left hand, and his swaying liquor were all seen through by this peculiar woman named Vanessa. She determined that Ethan was a vain man, accustomed to a wealthy lifestyle and skilled in gunplay. Thus, she offered him an irresistible proposal to do something for her that night. However, what caught Ethan's attention was not the money, but his curiosity about this woman. To be exact, her sexy body. He asked her what kind of work she did and if it involved killing, but she stopped his bullshit by asking if it mattered to him. Ethan pinned his eyes onto the sexy Vanessa as he absent-mindedly swirled his drink with his right hand. He said he'd agree if she could make him laugh his beard off. Vanessa smirked slightly, left a note, and walked away. It's hard to imagine if killing is as easy as reaching into a bag for someone, what Ethan could have done to cause him to flee from his hometown. In the evening, Ethan arrived at the designated location as agreed, where he met Vanessa and a man. The man was Sir Malcolm, a locally renowned explorer and author. They ventured underground together, where they encountered a gruesome scene of bloody carnage. Ethan cautiously took a few steps, scanning the surroundings. Suddenly, a ghastly figure crawled out from the pile of corpses. Standing at 2 meters tall, the figure's face was bloodless. Ethan fired several shots in quick succession, each hitting its mark, but the creature remained unfazed. It grabbed Ethan, flinging him aside, then turned its attention to Malcolm. Just then, Vanessa rushed in front of the creature, her eyes locked onto it, as if giving it her hormone shock. The creature didn't have time to react by the shock before Malcolm pierced its heart with an arrow from behind. Following this, they interrogated every barely alive corpse, stabbing each through the heart with a sword. Witnessing this, Ethan could only curse under his breath, regretting and wondering what kind of job he had gotten himself into. At dawn, they brought a corpse to a facility, a place where medical students studied anatomy. Most of the corpses were bought from grave robbers. The chief physician was rather busy, so they were asked to carry the body inside so his assistant, Victor Frankenstein, could examine it. Victor showed great interest in the corpse at first sight. It was unlike any other he had seen before. The corpse's eyes were bloodshot, its teeth sharp, its face devoid of blood, muscles well developed, and it bore an exoskeleton similar to an insect's. When he carefully opened the rib cage, some mysterious ancient hieroglyphics were revealed. Sir Malcolm took photos of it and handed them to Ethan, along with an address to collect his reward. He then went to the British Museum, where he hoped his tutor, proficient in ancient Egyptian, could translate the ancient text. The tutor named Lyle was incredibly eager to please Malcolm, hoping that he might be mentioned in Malcolm's books. Malcolm, needing his help, gladly agreed and handed Lyle the photos. Lyle scrutinized the photos with a magnifying glass. He speculated that the ancient text was probably from the 18th dynasty of ancient Egypt and was likely a standard sacrificial text about blood transmutation. The 18th dynasty was the most prosperous, spanning from 1575 BC to 1308 BC. By the current year of 1891, it had been over 3,000 years. Watching the text, a question popped into Lyle's mind. He wondered why an explorer like Malcolm suddenly took an interest in the spells from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. In order to discern Malcolm's true intentions, he didn't rush to ask him, but instead invited him to bring the rest of the photos to his house the following Friday. Malcolm had no choice but to wait. On his way home, Malcolm asked his butler to send a set of formal clothes to Victor's house, inviting Victor to meet at the Explorers Club. In the afternoon, Victor, still brimming with curiosity about the corpses, arrived at the club. Malcolm, straightforward as ever, offered a generous sum to hire Victor to investigate the origins of the corpses and find a solution. Victor was skeptical, not believing in the philanthropy of capitalists. He insisted Malcolm reveal his true motive before he would agree to join. Only then did Malcolm confess his true motivation. It turned out his daughter, Mina, had been taken by such monsters. He needed to understand what had happened and save her. Ethan had initially planned to perform in Paris as his next stop, but after this long night, he was left without any mood for it. His only feeling was curiosity about the truth of the matter. He also wanted to figure out the origins of these monsters and why Vanessa and the nobleman Malcolm were involved. And then there was the horrific scene of a mother and daughter gruesomely slaughtered and dismembered, their blood staining the scene. These mysteries piled up in Ethan's mind, making him question whether to stay or leave. As dusk fell and night descended with thick, ominous clouds, Victor returned home from the club. He felt a vague sense that he was being followed, but when he turned around, there was no sign of anyone. He opened the door to his lab and resumed his research, hoping to revive a corpse. Outside, the thunder was rolling, and the electrical device connected to the corpse was sparking. Victor crouched down to inspect the equipment when suddenly a flash of lightning streaked across the sky, and the power in the room went out. Victor was immediately on high alert. He lit a kerosene lamp with a match and turned to find the corpse had vanished. Drawing a sharp breath, he began to search the room for any hidden mysteries, only to find that his creation was revived by a flash of lightning. Victor was amazed by his successful experiment. This reborn being was as sensitive and fragile as a newborn child, curious yet fearful of its surroundings. Victor contemplated giving it a name, Adam. But no, the fruits of science should not be casually assigned religious monikers. Instead, he picked up a volume of Shakespeare's plays, using it as an example for his creation to choose its own name. And eventually, the creation happened to choose the word Proteus. It was always astonishing how fate made science marvel. The man who had been a sailor when he was alive had randomly chosen the name of a sea god from the book. Victor excitedly recorded the events of the night, deciding to work for Sir Malcolm to earn more money to support his own research. As dawn broke, Ethan woke up, finding himself in the company of a few rats. The sounds of sailors heading offshore were not far off. After another strange night, he felt a sour sensation, and there were wounds on his hands. This happened every 4 or 5 weeks, and he always woke up with no memory of what had occurred during the night. Ethan dragged himself into a pub and ordered a bottle of whiskey. A woman walked over, sizing him up, and then poured herself a drink. After exchanging a few words rather than hormones, he learned her name was Brona. Brona was a dockside prostitute who used to work in a textile factory. When her job was replaced by machines and she couldn't find work, she resorted to selling her body to survive. Recently, she had taken on a job as a model. After parting from Ethan, she ended up in an upscale villa district, ringing a doorbell. On the second floor, a slender figure stood in front of a wall full of paintings. As he turned around, it was a young man with captivating eyes named Dorian. He'd invited Brona to pose for a few photographs to catch the best of her beauty. After a few poses, Dorian seemed somewhat weary and asked Brona to remove her coat. As the tight coat was loosened to flex her belly muscles, her breathing became smoother. Suddenly, Brona coughed up blood. Long years working in a textile factory had given her tuberculosis. Slowly, Dorian stood up and asked if it was blood. Brona nodded, asking if he wanted her to leave. Dorian replied that as long as she did not want to go, she did not have to. He then moved closer to her and licked the blood from her lips. He said he had yet to experience the thrill of being with someone who was about to die. Brona's mind went blank, unable to tell if she was terrified or amazed. The sound of horse hooves gradually approached from outside. Lady Vanessa and Sir Malcolm descended from the Ferrari carriage. It was a Friday, the day Lyle had promised to help them translate the ancient Egyptian text. The villa was bustling with nobles and high-ranking officials coming and going. Sir Malcolm and Lyle retreated to the study, leaving Vanessa alone to wander into a sitting room. The room was a mix of elements from all around the world, filled with jovial chatter. A shadow appeared behind Vanessa, imbued with an inexplicable aura of mystery. Vanessa turned to find a graceful young man slowly approaching her. It was the same man, Dorian, who had taken Brona's photographs. He seemed to see right through Vanessa, understanding her disquiet. Despite feeling out of place, she was not ready to leave outright. She felt on guard, trapped in her own fears, hesitant to move forward. Just then, Lyle raised his voice in the sitting room, leading the guests into an entertainment session. The renowned medium Madame Kali hosted a séance, introducing the guests to the mysterious world of spiritualism. 8 of the braver guests were chosen to sit down, remove their jewelry, and place their hands on the table. They were instructed to let their thoughts wander freely in the dark space of their minds, imagining their souls strolling in the early ocean of ancient times, rising with the sun and wandering among the ancient gods on the earth. They called upon Mut, the mother goddess of all creation, and beckoned the arrival of the god of death. However, Madame Kali convulsed suddenly. The room fell silent in anticipation. A gruff voice echoed in the hall, asking who had summoned him. He is the god of the underworld, the ruler of life and death, and what the hell they want from him. But just then, it sensed there's another higher deity here. It's Amunet. Just then, Vanessa looked tense and started convulsing. The candles in the room snuffed out instantly. Vanessa, as if possessed, claimed that she is Amunet and levitated into the air after shattering the table, causing people around to panic. The door was forced to close, and as she continued cursing, the group all feared for their shitty lives, with the gentle man even covering his mouth like a little girl, while the others were trembling and letting out loud, chicken-like screams. Next, Vanessa pushed open the door gently and stormed off as if in anger. She was seen angrily walking in the storm. It turns out, this wasn't her first loss of control. Despite her careful composure, she'd sometimes lose control over herself due to certain people or incidents. A mysterious force had been plaguing her since she was a child. Her possession at Lyle's house coincided with Sir Malcolm's children's accusations against him. His son had followed Malcolm on an expedition to Africa, which might be more accurately described as an invasion. During the height of the British Industrial Revolution, they arrived in Africa, forced trade, pillaged, burned, and plundered. Unfortunately, the son contracted a plague and died in Africa. Meanwhile, Malcolm's daughter back in London was taken away by a mysterious force. The calamities that befell his children seemed to be a punishment for Sir Malcolm's past deeds. The following day, Sir Malcolm visited Lyle's residence alone. Firstly, to apologize for the events of yesterday, and secondly, to request the results of Lyle's translation of the ancient Egyptian text. Lyle informed him that it was a spell related to Amun-Ra. According to Egyptian mythology, the sun god Amun-Ra was hermaphroditic. When both masculine and feminine divinities coexisted, it could provoke disaster. At a banquet of the gods, both aspects of Amun-Ra appeared simultaneously. He unleashed a bloodthirsty lion beast to eliminate mankind. The beast descended upon the human realm, slaughtering and consuming human flesh. The world instantly turned into hell, with rivers of blood flowing across the earth. Upon discovering this, Zeus instructed humans to pour wine into the wheat fields. The lion beast, unable to distinguish between blood and wine, swiftly became intoxicated. Afterwards, Zeus gave humans a spell, which they were to keep in 2 parts, representing Amun-Ra and Amunet. As long as the 2 parts of the spell remained separated, disaster would be averted. Zeus then returned to the celestial realm, sending Amunet, the feminine divinity of the sun god, to the human world, which happened to possess Vanessa. It turns out, the spell Sir Malcolm brought in the photograph happened to combine the 2 spells. So now, if this divinity concealed within Vanessa was obtained by other forces, mankind would face a catastrophe. Lyle warned Sir Malcolm not to reveal the truth to Vanessa, to prevent her from acting rashly out of despair. On the other side, after a brief acquaintance, Ethan found Brona to be quite unique. Despite being a prostitute suffering from a terminal illness, she exuded an honest character when interacting with people, so Ethan invited Brona out for dinner in the evening. Brona laughingly asked him not to treat her like a rich man's daughter. On the way, they bumped into Dr. Victor, accompanied by a seemingly simple-minded man, Proteus. This was Proteus's first time outside, and he was overwhelmed by the sight of the blue sky, white clouds, buildings, and food. With Victor's help, he gradually adapted and even offered Brona some freshly bought chestnuts. Victor, fearing that too much conversation would reveal Proteus's origins, hurriedly left with Proteus. Back in the lab, Proteus seemed quite excited, hoping in the future to go out more, see the world, and make friends. As he expressed his wish to make many friends, a pair of hands erupted from Proteus's chest, tearing him in two. Just then, a hideous figure appeared before Victor, calling him father and saying his first child had returned. The scene flashes back to the time when the young Victor grew up in a noble family. He loved projecting his feelings onto the grass, forests, and rivers, seeking tranquility in nature. However, this made him a loner, and it was hard for anyone to penetrate his world. The only person who cared about him, his mother, died of illness in his youth. From that day, Victor started researching the secrets of the human body. The monster standing before him now turns out to be his first creation. When this creation first awoke on the operating table, it was filled with pain and fear. It roared and screamed, seeking a shred of comfort. However, Victor was terrified by the sight and fled for his shitty life. Later, the creature learned about the outside world through the window upstairs, acquired knowledge from books in the house, and understood Victor through his left-behind notes and bookmarkings. Victor was a person who loved classical romantic literature. Both had common traits. They loved capturing fleeting beauty, experiencing joy and mystery, but shunning responsibility. No wonder Victor abandoned his first creation. Victor's motto is to seize the beauty of the moment without bearing any responsibility. Over the years, the creature wandered among people with his hideous face, shunned like a rat crossing the street. No one liked him, no one accepted him, and all his agony was because of the irresponsible Victor. He decided to take revenge on Victor. One day, he was seen by some passers-by, beaten simply because of his ugly appearance. He cowered in a corner of the alley, recalling the evil faces of people. Then an elder appeared, gave him a small tube of wine, and took him to a horror theater he ran. This was the first time he had ever felt kindness from others. Hence, he worked hard. He spent his free time reading books and even gave himself a name, Claire. One day, he discovered Victor and began to secretly follow him, waiting for the right moment to take revenge. When he found out Victor had created another life, he was greatly pained and enraged. That's why he cruelly killed Proteus. But he didn't stop there. He demanded Victor create a bride for him, or he would kill Victor's friends and family. After dinner, Ethan and Brona quickly became intimate. This time, Ethan seemed serious. He wanted to earn money to treat Brona's illness, so he thought of Sir Malcolm. On the other hand, since Vanessa lost control during the medium's seance session, Mina's voice had been lingering in her ears, making her feel distracted. She and Sir Malcolm searched for Mina's traces on the map based on their vague memories, possibly at the London Zoo. So, Vanessa, Ethan, Sir Malcolm, and his butler went to the London Zoo for clues of Malcolm's missing daughter. It was a quiet night with only the rustling of leaves on the ground. Ethan asked if this was the place. Vanessa said it should be right. As they walked into the center of the park, some shadows flitted by, a pack of wolves. Sir Malcolm prepared to shoot, but Ethan told him not to fire or move. He slowly walked towards the wolves. A wolf also slowly approached him. Ethan slowly squatted down, extended his right hand, fingers together, and stared intently at the alpha wolf's eyes. The wolf, its eyes glowing, bared its teeth, nipped Ethan's fingers, and then turned and left. Vanessa and Sir Malcolm exchanged a look, sensing that something was off. But now was not the time for idle talk. The primary task was to find Mina. They searched the zoo and finally caught a boy named Fenton, who was eating a rabbit raw. Sir Malcolm tried to use a whip to make Fenton reveal his daughter's whereabouts, but the method was ineffective. Victor, now gaining new understanding from his first and second creation, decided to study Fenton using the method he used to create Proteus, saying that there is one thing you need to consider. When you transform a life, you're making it anew. Whatever happens to that creature downstairs, we are responsible for it. It is our burden now. Every action builds another link that binds us to it, and that chain is everlasting. At dawn, Vanessa sat outside the church, lost in thought. She saw Dorian emerge from the church from a distance. He was wearing a dark blue cloak, paired with a light gray patterned scarf. It reminded her of their first meeting, how Dorian, with just one look, seemed to peer into Vanessa's deepest thoughts. Now, seeing him emerge from the church again, Vanessa, still wavering on whether to continue believing in God, couldn't help but wonder what secrets this mysterious man held. Compelled to find out, she followed him to the greenhouse. Dew hung on the flower buds. Dorian, eyes half closed, was savoring the scent of life. Vanessa stood by awkwardly and finally greeted him. Dorian turned around, returned the greeting, and commented how Vanessa also seemed to enjoy studying biology. Awkwardly, Vanessa admitted that her only study of plants involved figuring out how to kill them. Dorian laughed, and they walked and talked together. He introduced her to two special flowers, the deadly yet fragrant belladonna and the Roth's pitcher plant that blooms only once every several years. These reflect Vanessa's daily struggles. Every day, she prays to God to resist the mystical forces encroaching upon her, yet decades of prayer haven't brought her any solace from God. Only the devil calls out to her day and night. She doesn't know when such days will end. Afterward, he bid Vanessa goodbye, promising to see her later that evening at the Grand Horror Theater to watch some Daniel C.C. horror movies. Vanessa didn't originally plan to go, but somehow ends up at the theater later, indicating that she's already on the edge of danger. Dorian uses this method, coupled with his own mysterious aura, to shake Vanessa's commitment to God. On the other side, Victor successfully transfused new blood into Fenton, but it didn't work. Fenton still refused apples, feeding only on flesh and blood. To ensure the lab rat's cooperation, the butler shocked everyone by killing a kitten for Fenton's meal. That evening, the Grand Horror Theater was bustling with people. Brona stood at the ticket booth, her mouth agape with excitement. She had always wanted to see a horror play, but never had enough money after feeding herself. Ethan bought tickets and led Brona into the theater. The spacious, bright hall filled Brona with joy. Ethan, witnessing her happiness, felt a sense of satisfaction. They found seats near the middle, and Ethan bought Brona an orange, hoping the horror play would bring her even more joy. Backstage, the showrunner deftly operated various props. 5 minutes later, cold fireworks ignited in front of the stage, and the curtains slowly rose. The horror play began. It shows a 15-year-old young girl who was waiting for her lover to return on a dark and stormy night. However, that night, her lover was possessed by a demon. Despite his best efforts to resist, he couldn't overcome the demonic power. Meanwhile, Sir Malcolm and Dr. Victor were busy downstairs when they heard a noise from upstairs. They followed the sound to Vanessa's room, where a red-eyed, fanged creature was glaring at them. Just then, Fenton leaped from who knows where and clambered onto Malcolm's head, babbling to its master that the girl was not here. As soon as he finished speaking, the creature broke through the window and fled for its monstrous life. Victor was so frightened that he fell to the ground, trembling. Malcolm grabbed Fenton and flung him aside. Fenton's head hit the glass, and he died instantly. Inside the theater, Dorian was on the second floor enjoying the horror play. Suddenly, he spotted Vanessa across from him. They exchanged smiles and continued watching the play. The young girl in the play hoped her lover could defeat the devil with the power of love. However, in the end, the devil tore open the lover's skin and leaped out, ending the girl's life with a single strike. The men in the audience clapped and cheered, while the women screamed in fright. The first horror play ended. The plot of the horror play mirrors recent events in London, where beasts attack humans at night. It represents the werewolf's frenzied slaughter on full moon nights and subtly transitions into the scene where mystical forces send vampires after the demon-possessed Vanessa. This subtly suggests that London is filled with werewolves and vampires at night, which is indeed a reflection of Victorian-era London. Elsewhere, Vanessa went to the bar and ordered a drink, spotting Ethan and Brona nearby. She walked over and politely greeted them. Ethan introduced Brona, who was standing next to him. Brona, seeing the polite and aristocratic Vanessa, felt somewhat pressured. Soon after, Dorian also arrived. He had just photographed Brona a few days ago, and now they were meeting again in this setting. It truly is a small world. Dorian greeted them and started discussing the plot of the play. Brona began to feel as if the room was running out of air. She looked up at Ethan as if sending a distress signal, but Ethan, engrossed in the plot discussion, didn't notice that. Brona retreated a few steps and then ran out of the theater. Ethan finally noticed this and followed her. With the rapid industrial development and population surge, London appears shiny on the surface, but it's filled with various sins and darkness at night. People like Brona, who work diligently, eventually contract tuberculosis and have to support themselves by selling their bodies. This shows that although Britain is becoming wealthier, the lives of the lower people are still treated as insignificant, even if they hold British citizenship. Brona had worked hard in the textile factory for survival, and she didn't mind the hardships. Out of desperation, she chose to be a prostitute, but she could still laugh heartily. However, a simple conversation could unexpectedly break down her last defenses. She fell onto the street and got up, even slapping Ethan, who came to help. Ethan is like the executioner of that era, with hands covered in blood, yet retaining a bit of conscience in his heart. He wants to do something, but can't change anything. While she knew she couldn't blame Ethan, she didn't know who she could hold responsible. After that, she left Ethan behind and stumbled back home. Her tuberculosis chose this moment to flare up. Ethan, bewildered, remained where he was, from baffled to helpless, and then to a rising, nameless anger, wanting to escape everything. At this point, Dorian also came out, saw Ethan's disoriented state, and took him to an interesting place. From the moment they opened the door, it was clear that this was an illicit gathering spot. Seeing Dorian, the people inside politely invited them in. Downstairs was a bustling and noisy scene with over 100 rats in a pool. The dealer held the little killing machine, and people placed their bets on the number they guessed. There were professionals calculating how many rats the killing machine could kill in a minute, and the scene became bloody. Ethan, watching this, felt nauseous. He went to the bar for a drink and ended up in a fight with 3 Englishmen. Afterward, they went to Dorian's mansion. Dorian guessed right again. It was 97 rats. But even this game was becoming boring for him. Back at home, he made some absinthe and played Wagner's opera, Tristan and Isolde's Love Death. Ethan, listening to the opera and drinking absinthe, felt as if he were being led to the guillotine by an irreversible fate. The scene shifts to explain the origins of Vanessa, who wasn't born possessed by demons. The story begins over a decade ago. Vanessa and Mina's families have been friends for generations. Mina has a younger brother named Peter. They often played by the sea or in the large mansion, messing with odd specimens. The 3 of them had a great relationship. Mina was gentle, Vanessa was a bit wilder, and Peter was somewhat girlish. On the night Sir Malcolm returned from Africa, the 2 families had dinner together. Sir Malcolm regaled them with tales of his adventures in Africa, captivating both the adults and children. After dinner, the 3 children played. Vanessa wandered into the garden maze, and in the dim night, she began to hear heavy breathing, like someone was performing hormone yoga. Following the sound out of curiosity, Vanessa discovered Sir Malcolm having an affair with her mother. From that moment, the seed of evil in Vanessa's heart began to sprout. When they reached marriageable age, Mina was engaged to the handsome captain and was about to marry into India, while Peter was to accompany his father on an expedition to Africa. Vanessa was in a state of turmoil. She first forcefully kissed Peter, hoping he would stay and marry her, but Peter refused her because going on an African expedition was his dream. Later, Vanessa slept with Mina's fiancé at Mina's bachelorette party and was discovered by Mina. Subsequently, Mina left the heartbroken town, and Vanessa fell seriously ill. This sudden illness baffled all the nearby doctors, who thought Vanessa's brain had malfunctioned. Eventually, Vanessa's parents decided to send her to a mental hospital in London for treatment. In the mental institution, Vanessa endured unimaginable torment: hydrotherapy, ice therapy, lobotomy, solitary confinement. It was not until she gave up all resistance that her parents took her home. That very night, Vanessa's mother witnessed her possessed by a demon and died of shock on the spot. From that point onwards, Vanessa had the ability to communicate with spirits. She encountered the apparition of Mina on the beach, who told her that her brother Peter had died in Africa and she was now captured by a demon. Mina hoped that Vanessa would come to rescue her. Consequently, Vanessa sought out Sir Malcolm. Initially, he wanted to kill Vanessa out of anger, but eventually he gave her a chance to stay. From then on, the pair embarked on a mission to save Mina. During this time, they tracked down a minion named Fenton at the London Zoo based on Vanessa's visions. They hoped to obtain Mina's whereabouts and a cure for mutation from Fenton. However, they inadvertently led the monster to Vanessa's residence. The monster came to capture Vanessa late at night, only to find that she was not in the room. Fenton covered for the monster's escape, tangled with Sir Malcolm, and was accidentally killed by him. For a while after, Mina's apparition did not appear, which caused Sir Malcolm to become very anxious and argue with Vanessa. Later, Vanessa sensed through tarot cards that many murders had occurred on a ship, and they might find Mina there. At this time, Dorian came to visit Vanessa, apologizing for his abrupt departure at the Grand Horror Theater the other day, and invited Vanessa to join him for dinner. Sir Malcolm, who had no intention of going out with Vanessa at night, conveniently encouraged Vanessa to accept the invitation. Hence, Vanessa happily went to change her clothes and left with Dorian. The butler reminded Sir Malcolm that if they found Mina and realized she had become a monster, he should carefully consider his actions. On the other side of town, Ethan left Dorian's house and returned to the small tavern. Brona's illness was getting worse. She was coughing up blood on her pillow. He opened the window, allowing a sliver of sunlight to enter, and held Brona in his arms, hoping to ease her suffering, even if just a little. Meanwhile, Vanessa was visiting Dorian's home. Dorian took a portrait photograph of Vanessa as a keepsake. They then went to an Italian restaurant for dinner. Dorian shared some of his experiences and reflections over the years: Fabianism, transcendentalism, utilitarianism, aestheticism, and socialism. He only liked a bit of each philosophy. What he sought was an everlasting, fresh joy. Vanessa did not comment on this. She felt that Dorian shared the same sense of mystery and solitude as herself. She wondered, if two people destined for perpetual loneliness came together, would the feeling of loneliness still exist? This thought led Vanessa to Dorian's mansion once more in the middle of the night, to experience art and share solitude. Elsewhere, Malcolm and Ethan arrived at the docks in search of a quarantined plague ship. They descended the ladder into the ship's cargo hold, filled with stacks of cargo boxes. Rats scurried underfoot, and infected women were scattered about, their hair white, their nails long and untrimmed. Ethan slowly pulled out his handgun, ready for a fight at any moment. Malcolm examined over 20 bodies, none of them Mina's. Just as they were about to leave, the women's corpses opened their eyes and began to attack. During the melee, a kerosene lamp fell to the floor, and flames began to spread throughout the ship's hold. Ethan fired 2 shots, taking care of the 2 attacking Malcolm. Unexpectedly, the butler was pinned to a crate by one of them. He used a dagger to fend off the sharp teeth of the undead woman, while his other hand drew a knife across her throat. In the frantic minutes that followed, they managed to take down all the white-haired women. However, by this time, the fire was raging, and the pillars supporting the ship began to fall. Through the flames, Malcolm saw a tall creature, the same one that had visited him late at night before. It held a woman in its arms. It was Mina, his long-lost daughter. Malcolm called out Mina's name and ran towards the fire. Ethan and the butler rushed forward to pull him back. The fire was too intense. They couldn't get through. They could only watch helplessly as Mina was carried away by the creature. Malcolm was filled with regret. If Vanessa had been present for this mission, perhaps they could have saved Mina this time. On the other side, when Vanessa shared her solitude with Dorian, her soul was once again invaded by demons. This time seemed even more severe than the last. When Sir Malcolm saw Vanessa, she appeared distant and exhausted, hoisted by an invisible force. At this moment, Dorian arrived at his secret room, observing the disappearing bloodstains on his body in the mirror. Vanessa, realizing something was terribly wrong while she was in hormone yoga with Dorian, abruptly left his mansion and returned home. Sir Malcolm had been in a night-long battle with the monster, failing to rescue his daughter Mina. When he saw Vanessa, he wanted to apologize for his unauthorized actions, only to find that Vanessa had been possessed by a demon and was suspended in the air. The next day, Sir Malcolm and the butler changed Vanessa's clothes, made tea, and observed her condition, fearing she might lose control again. However, the person who woke up was no longer Vanessa. Speaking in Mina's voice, she recited the story of how Sir Malcolm's wife cried every night when he was not at home, unable to sleep. She then revealed Sir Malcolm's atrocities in Africa, forcing his son Peter to violate women to prove his manhood. The adventure that Peter had dreamt of turned into his lifelong nightmare until the plague took his life. The teacup on the table was flung towards the ceiling in anger, and everything in the room started to fly around. Sir Malcolm stood helplessly in the room. Upon hearing the commotion, the butler ran in and knocked Vanessa unconscious, stopping the chaos in the room. In the afternoon, Vanessa seemed much more stable. Sir Malcolm summoned Dr. Victor to check on her. Her pulse was steady and strong, her heart rate normal, but she had no memory of the morning's events. Victor hoped Vanessa would eat something to regain her strength and to check if her stomach was functioning normally. Suddenly, Vanessa grabbed Victor's hand and began reciting a verse that Victor loved. "I can't seem to get it out of my head. No more let life divide what death can join together." These words confirmed Victor's secret of creating new life, something he had never mentioned to anyone. Hearing this from the babbling Vanessa sent a chill down Victor's spine. However, as an atheist, he went to the study with Sir Malcolm to analyze the cause of Vanessa's illness. Suddenly, a swarm of spiders crawled out from under the dominoes on the desk, covering the floor of the study. Then Vanessa's scream echoed from upstairs. By the time Ethan arrived, it was already late at night. Vanessa huddled by the bed, her hands clasped around her knees, rocking back and forth, moaning in pain. Ethan, in all the time he had known her, had never seen this side of the normally composed and refined Vanessa. Vanessa managed to force out a few words, saying sorry to him and that she was not quite herself right now. Ethan sympathetically took Vanessa's hand, offering her the warmth and support she needed. Vanessa slowly lifted her head and said it's been a long time since she had felt such a warm hand. She then asked Ethan who slept with whom that night between him and Dorian. This question really shocked Ethan and showed that he also had an intimate relationship with the mysterious man Dorian. Ethan, taken aback, let go of Vanessa's hand. Vanessa's face twisted into a grimace as she crawled towards Ethan, spouting about how Dorian had slept with Brona while she was coughing up blood. The coming group had to hold Vanessa down and sedate her to calm her down. They gathered in the study to discuss how to save Vanessa from her possession. Ethan suggested calling a priest, while Dr. Victor mocked, "Why not call a witch instead?" Sir Malcolm agreed that it wasn't the first time Vanessa had been like this, but as long as she was alive, she could fight it with her willpower. In the following month, Vanessa remained in this agonizing state. One day when she had just woken up and was still lucid, she found Ethan sitting by her bed, telling him to kill her if she ever starts hurting others. Ethan replied she would never expect to be sent to heaven. Then his eyes turned pitch black. At that moment, the real Ethan was downstairs chatting with Sir Malcolm, holding the St. Jude pendant Brona had given him for protection. Suddenly, Vanessa's screams echoed from upstairs. Ethan and Sir Malcolm rushed in to find Victor thrown against the wall like an adult toy. Vanessa was scratching the plaster wall with her fingernails. The blood vessels on her chest showed the symbol of Amun-Ra and Amunet joined together, indicating the imminent destruction. She was screaming in pain, scratching bloody marks on her arms. The men rushed to hold Vanessa down and sedated her. This went on for another month. Everyone was at a loss, watching as Vanessa's condition worsened day by day. Sir Malcolm came to Vanessa's bedside, asking her to search for Mina's whereabouts. Ethan, who happened to walk in on this, pulled Sir Malcolm out of the room and insisted on calling a priest. If Vanessa wanted to end her life, they should let her soul rest in peace. But Sir Malcolm, who hadn't gotten any clues about Mina, naturally disagreed. Victor, in his anger, said Vanessa was about to die, and he was still thinking about how to use her. He further challenged Malcolm if this is how he had been, all the way from Africa to the New World. His words hit a nerve, and Sir Malcolm grabbed Victor by the collar and pushed him against the wall. Ethan stopped him, saying there was a girl inside that needed rescuing. Sir Malcolm was speechless and let go of Victor, walking downstairs. Before long, a priest hurried over to deliver Vanessa's last rites. Vanessa, who had been gasping for air, suddenly sprang up, latched onto the priest's head, and bit off a chunk of flesh from his face. She then leapt to the ceiling and lunged at the Lord. The window glass shattered in an instant. Victor and the Lord, along with a few others, dodged and fled outside. Ethan pulled out his gun and pointed it at Vanessa. At this point, Vanessa had quieted down somewhat. She advanced towards the gun step by step. Ethan grabbed Vanessa's head, pressed it against the wall, and shouted her name. In a daze, Vanessa came to her senses again. She asked Ethan to shoot her to end her misery. Ethan suddenly remembered the St. Jude pendant that Brona had given him. So he performed an exorcism for Vanessa. After a series of exorcism spells, Vanessa regained her senses and collapsed on the floor. This episode detailed the pain Vanessa endured after being possessed by a demon. When Sir Malcolm crawled to the bedside and asked Vanessa to search for Mina's whereabouts, one could strongly feel the director's intent to use this method to portray the pain that invaders brought to Africa and the New World during the Victorian era. During Vanessa's comatose period, Ethan told Victor about some of the things that happened when they conquered primitive tribes in the New World. The army would forcibly take their children, deprive them of their faith, and subject them to uniform management and education. The children were made to be their guinea pigs or soldiers, much like Vanessa when she was first sent to the mental hospital. The only thing they could do before death was to obey. Few children were fortunate enough to escape the school and return to the tribe after much hardship, but they had forgotten the tribe's language and lifestyle. Afterwards, they wandered around until they died, much like Vanessa in the show, unable to integrate into real life while hiding from the pursuit of demons. When Vanessa woke up again, images of Mina and the horror theater flashed in her mind. As the final episode of this season, let's first recap the storyline. An ancient Egyptian spell about Amun-Ra and Amunet triggered the monster that roams the Victorian-era London nights. The five-person team of Sir Malcolm, Vanessa, Ethan, Victor, and the butler work on rescuing Mina, while also deciphering the origin of the mysterious power. Sir Malcolm is Mina's father. Vanessa is Mina's best friend. Ethan is an escapee from America. Dr. Victor is a specialist focused on human anatomy research, and the butler is a friend Sir Malcolm made during his explorations in Africa. In the meantime, Victor's secret second creation, Proteus, is killed by his first creation, Claire. Claire demands Victor to create a wife for him as a companion. Ethan meets the ill-fated Brona in a small tavern, and sparks of love ignite between them. However, Brona is suffering from tuberculosis and is not long for this world. Dorian in the show uses his eerie methods to enjoy the bodies of many key characters, including Brona, Ethan, and Vanessa. No one knows his purpose, age, or past. All that is known is that he's a handsome young man in his 20s. In addition, through several horrifying murders in London and Ethan's monthly amnesia on the same day, Ethan is initially identified as one of the primary suspects in the murder cases. Regarding the decryption progress of the mysterious power, it's preliminarily estimated that vampires are causing trouble. The vampire's goal is to survive, multiply, and conquer the world. Based on their continuous attempts to capture Vanessa, it's hypothesized that Vanessa is a necessary and sufficient condition for the vampires to grow and strengthen. Therefore, what seems to be a small group of 5 people catching monsters is more like the monsters luring the enemy deeper into the trap. In the last episode, Vanessa was possessed by a demon and endured great pain. At the brink of death, Ethan used the St. Jude pendant to temporarily drive the demon out of Vanessa. When Vanessa woke up again, images of Mina in the horror theater flashed in her mind. The scene shifts to the quiet sanctuary of her office, where Vanessa recounts to Sir Malcolm the images of Mina that have appeared in her mind. So they decide to investigate the Grand Guignol Theater that night. This time, Sir Malcolm is determined to save his daughter. If he can't save her body, he will save her soul. Claire, who works at the Grand Guignol Theater, was driven out today. It turns out there are 2 people at the theater who have been kind to Claire, the theater owner and a young girl. The girl often chats with Claire and says comforting words that warm his heart. On this day, the theater is rehearsing a new play when a magical rope suspends the girl's boyfriend in midair. Claire frantically tries to rectify the situation. The boyfriend, in anger, spews out a slew of harsh words. Claire attempts to apologize, but the boyfriend isn't having it. He leaves the theater with the girl, leaving Claire to fix the props and retreat to his room to read. After a while, the girl returns to visit Claire, bringing an orange and apologizing for her boyfriend's rudeness. She gently kisses Claire on the forehead before leaving, hoping he can be happier. For the first time, a smile appears on Claire's face. He tidies his hair, applies eyeliner, blushes his eyebrows, puts on lipstick, and goes to the dressing room with an orange to find the girl. The girl, busy mending clothes, sees Claire's appearance in the mirror and can't help but laugh, asking what he has done to his face. Claire feels embarrassed. He thought the girl's kindness meant she liked him, or at least had some affection for him. So, he had prepared to confess his feelings, but it had backfired. He impulsively kissed the girl, who screamed in fright. He only then realized his overreaction. Later, the theater owner speaks with him and sends him away. As he leaves, the owner tells him to remember those who have helped and warmed him. It will enrich his heart. Claire, now without a place to go, ends up in the place of his creation, Dr. Victor's laboratory. Soon, Victor returns to his lab. He has been taking care of Vanessa and has not had a proper rest. Upon arriving home and seeing Claire's demanding face, his mood naturally doesn't improve. He quietly takes a gun from his bag, intending to deal with Claire, but Claire's words stop him. Claire says he once fantasized about having a companion and it could encourage him and give him strength. But now he knows it's impossible because the devil is not on his face but in his soul. He once thought that if he was like a normal person, he would be happy and someone would love him. But now malice is spreading and his face merely reflects the ugliness of his heart. He then confronted Victor, why he didn't give him a heart of stone and why he instead gave him emotions. He would rather be a corpse than a flesh and blood human. He then begs Victor to shoot him because it will be a relief for him. But Victor hesitates to pull the trigger. Right then, a knock sounded at the door. It was Ethan. Ever since rescuing Vanessa, he had remained by Brona's side, praying daily. Now, coming to see Victor, it must be that Brona was close to death. Dr. Victor instructed Claire to wait at home for him as he followed Ethan to the tavern. Ethan's gentleness made Brona appear comfortable on her sickbed. But illness is a cruel thing, and even breathing caused Brona pain. Victor injected some sedatives to ease her suffering. With her last ounce of strength, Brona said her goodbyes to Victor. To grant Brona relief sooner, Victor suffocated her with a pillow. He later took care of her final arrangements. Ethan went to the tavern for a drink. 2 men from America, sent by Ethan's father to bring him home, walked in. Ethan wiped the tear stains from his eyes and swiftly knocked both men to the floor before leaving the tavern. Elsewhere, Sir Malcolm went to a gun store to buy a newly released pistol. Inside, he ran into Madame Cayley, the medium from the Lyle household. They exchanged a few words, and Madame Cayley asked about Vanessa's condition. Sir Malcolm explained that Vanessa was a friend of his daughter's, and he didn't know her well. At the time, Vanessa was at home, predicting Dorian's past and future with tarot cards. This man had no future but countless pasts. When Dorian paid her another visit, Vanessa rejected his affection. For the first time in his life, Dorian experienced the taste of rejection. Time flew, and night fell quickly. Sir Malcolm and the group of 5 arrived at the Grand Guignol Theater. This time, the situation was somewhat different from the plague ship. The number of white-haired witches had doubled. The two sides fell into a fierce battle. Despite their courage and skill, they were outnumbered. A creature jumped out to capture Vanessa. It seemed to want Vanessa, but also seemed afraid to approach. Sir Malcolm stabbed it in the heart, and it fell from the second floor. By now, Ethan, Victor, and the butler were surrounded by the witches. Sir Malcolm quickly went downstairs and stabbed the creature in the heart again, ensuring it was dead. The witches died one after another because of that. Just then, a voice came from a dark corner of the theater. It was Mina. Vanessa happily embraced her, but suddenly Mina grabbed Vanessa by the neck and thanked her father for bringing Vanessa to her, saying her master would be pleased and their team would soon join the master's ranks and help create a new world. As she said this, she bared her fangs to bite Vanessa's neck. In a panic, Sir Malcolm shot and killed Mina, who had already been converted or possessed. The innocent and lovely girl died in front of her guilt-ridden father. Upon returning, Sir Malcolm made arrangements to visit his deceased son, Peter, in Africa. Victor took Brona's body back to his lab, intending to create a bride for Claire. The 2 Americans whom Ethan knocked out in the bar found Ethan again. This time, they weren't simply knocked out. On this full moon night, Ethan revealed his fangs and claws, and he vented his anger on them without mercy. Vanessa often sat outside the church. After Mina's death, she walked into the church for the first time to ask the priest for an exorcism. The drama comes to an end. But why did Ethan escape from America? What kind of bride will Dr. Victor create for Claire? Who is the master that's continuously after Vanessa? All these questions will be answered in Season 2. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.